Alright, let's do another video where we review some of the important events of that take place just after Solomon's reign. So, when Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam is going to be his successor. But it's clear from the very first verse about this, right here, that the succession is not as sure and going as well right off the bat as one would hope, because Rehoboam has to go to Shechem. Now let me just show you where Shechem is in relation to Jerusalem, and you'll see what's going on here. So here's Jerusalem. If we zoom in, you're going to see Jerusalem's in the top of the hill country here, just on the border of the Benjamin, Judah tribal territory. And if we keep going, we'll just go a little bit north here. Where is this? Alright, we're just going to scroll up. You see Jerusalem here. I can't fit it all in when the screen's minimized. And if you just keep going north, when it's minimized, we can't see this. We have to go in a little bit more. There's Nablus, which is the modern name for Shechem. Alright, so you can see it's a little ways away here from Jerusalem. You have to go through the hill country. And this is in the hill country, or the mountains of Ephraim. So the fact that the king, who is from Judah, has to go from Ephraim immediately shows that he is on a little bit of shaky ground, that he has to make a concession just where he's going to get the tribes to come and crown him king. Now the person who is in charge there at Shechem, and I'm going to show you another picture, or really another map. So again, you can see up here we've got, here we go, Jerusalem right here, and all these mountains, and it's right up in here is where Shechem is. This map's from a different time period, so they don't have it on there. And the person who's leading that group is Jeroboam. Now Jeroboam was a political threat to Solomon because there was a prophecy he'd be a king, and so he fled down into Egypt. And when Solomon dies, he returns. So he sought asylum in Egypt and was raised there for a while in the Egyptian court, or lived in the Egyptian court. And then he comes back up north when Solomon dies and leads the coalition of these northern tribes down to deal with Rehoboam and talk about whether they would accept Rehoboam as king or not. And the issue is the taxes, and whether he is going to be as strong in taxing them as Solomon. So Solomon is a strong enough king. He can keep levying more and more and more taxes and more demand for people to serve in his court and his armies and so on, and no one will rebel against him. But when his son is taking over, they are going to come with some demands that they want that eased. And we'll talk in class about the wisdom or lack thereof and what Rehoboam does. But because he says he's going to impose even more, these tribes rebel against him, and the kingdom is divided, and they are going to have 10 tribes in the north and 2 in the south. We'll talk more about that in class, but this becomes a hugely important part of Israelite history. We now go from these 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, who had what we call the united monarchy. We don't call it the United Kingdom. Somebody already uses that name today, but the united monarchy, to the divided kingdoms, meaning the 2 tribes in the south, that would be Judah and Benjamin, and the 10 tribes in the north. Now, the tribal divisions here actually get a little bit confusing. Let me show you a little bit of what I mean. Alright, so if we look at these maps, what you'll see, Simeon has a little bit of territory here, but he's mostly going to be up here, and some of them are on this side. But the difficulty is that Levi doesn't have any tribal territory, because the Levites are scattered all around. There are still 10 tribes in the north. That's because Joseph's tribe was divided into 2, Ephraim here and Manasseh here and here. So, in a way, we're talking about 12 tribes, in a way 13. When it comes to tribal allotments, there are 2 in the south, 10 in the north. The Levites are scattered in both. Of course, there are people from every tribe in both, because some people have moved around, but for the most part, they've stayed in their areas. So we'll talk about what happens as a result of this division. All right, so let's look at what happens as Jeroboam tries to set up his kingdom. The kingdom divides. This is a very important event to understand. It will divide between the northern 10 tribes and the southern tribes, and we'll call this the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, or the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. By the way, this is important to understand for understanding the Book of Mormon and a bunch of other things. So the kingdom of Judah, or Yehuda, anyone who's part of this kingdom is a Yehudit, or a member of the kingdom of Judah. We translate that as Jews, all right? And so later, when it talks about being of the Jews, after the northern kingdom is destroyed, when it talks about being of the Jews, it just means you're from the southern kingdom, regardless of what tribe you're in. And we'll look at that again later, but it's important to understand. In any case, these are the two phrases: southern kingdom or kingdom of Judah, northern kingdom and kingdom of Israel. So what happens is that Jeroboam starts out, he builds his capital there in Shechem in Mount Ephraim. It won't stay there for long. It will get moved, and we'll look at that in about a week. But he has a problem. He realizes that if everyone goes to the temple in Jerusalem to worship and do their rituals and so on that they need to do, that they will be beholden to the house of David, or in other words, to the kings of the southern kingdom, and he doesn't want this. So he is going to set up his own cultic sites. Now he sets them up at the northern and southern ends of the kingdom. He sets one up in Dan, which is the northernmost settlement. There is land that the tribes control above there, but it's all agricultural land. So this is the northernmost settlement. And at Bethel, which is the southernmost settlement here, right on the border of the tribe of Benjamin there, but it is Ephraim, Ephraim's country. So we've got the Benjamin, or the Bethel is the southern, Dan is the northern, and he sets up these cultic centers. So in Dan, they actually have excavated and found the remains of the cultic center. You can see it here. There's an altar. This altar is reconstructed. What they found was the horn, and knowing the ratio of the size of the horns to the altar in other places, they reconstructed what this would have been like, and I would guess this is probably about right. It would have been a big altar. And then the high place where the calf was. So remember that there were golden calves. We've got it right here that he made 2 calves of gold, and he also sets up some altars there. We'll talk more about that in class. But in any case, he sets that up right here where the altar is, and let me just move this over a little bit. There we go. Where the altar is, and that high place. All right, so here are some of the stones. You can see this is the high place. You can see these are the reconstructed new stones, and you should be able to tell without having done any archaeology. I would guess you can tell these are the old stones that were original, and these are the newer reconstructed ones. But all of this is what originally actually was there. Some more pictures of that so you can get an idea. These are this little high place where the golden calves were. That is ground zero. And where they made these rituals, that's ground zero for the scattering of your ancestors. It started with the idolatry that took place here at Dan and in Bethel as they introduced idolatry that would eventually lead to, sorry, that's the beginning of the Jordan River right next to this. The headwaters of the Jordan are right there. That key event in the history of your ancestors happens here. Now, God will warn Jeroboam not to do this. Jeroboam will continue to do it. He's smitten. He's healed. The prophet who warns him is tested by another prophet and fails, and Jeroboam continues to worship idols. Then what we get is some more interesting politics going on. Jeroboam has told us his son is sick, that he will die, and the line won't continue through Jeroboam's seed because of his wickedness. Often the king is allowed to rule, or the priest, but the line won't continue through their seed because of their wickedness. And that's exactly what happens here. Jeroboam is told that. Rehoboam is ready to go to war against Jeroboam to reclaim the kingdom, but God tells him not to, that this is of God, that the kingdom is divided, and so Rehoboam doesn't. They do war from time to time, but Rehoboam isn't trying to take over Jeroboam's kingdom, so it's probably Jeroboam as the aggressor, and they build fortifications against each other. And eventually, even an Egyptian comes against them. Understand the Egyptian invasion in context. Let's look at what is happening. Rehoboam doesn't set up idolatrous practices like Jeroboam did, but still Judah is turning to wickedness. They're provoking the Lord above all that their fathers had done in a couple of ways. They're building high places images and groves, all right, on every high hill. So these are places where they go to worship idols, and the groves are usually, images are idols. Groves are usually associated with a particular goddess, and they have fertility aspects to them. There may be, I don't know, sexual rites going on there. It may just be idol worship. I'm not sure. So they have that going on. Also, there are sodomites in the land. Sodomy or sodomites is a reference to homosexuality. A practice, and I want to emphasize practice. It's the practice that is condemned again and again very strongly in the Old Testament. The Lord is very clear about this practice. And because of all these abominations that they're getting from the nations that they were supposed to get rid of, they're drinking in of their abominations, the Lord is going to punish them. So Shishak will come in against Jerusalem. Now, Shishak is actually, in Egyptian sources, known as Shashank. Right, same guy, just different way of doing names in different languages, like James and Jacob are the same name, just different languages, or Joseph and Jose, right? So here is Shashank, a Libyan ruler in Egypt, who does come in and fight against the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. Actually, in the Bible, they don't mention what he does in the northern kingdom. They're not as concerned with the northern kingdom. But from Shashank's or Shishak's sources, we get it. This is a wall he builds in the, it's called the Bubastite portal, but it's in the temple of Karnak, where he lists, so here's Shashank, and he lists all the different towns and areas that he conquers and destroys. We know he actually did more damage in the northern kingdom, which is interesting because Rehoboam was someone that he knew there in Egypt. Rehoboam had been in his court, but still, as he gets more powerful, Egypt is having a resurgence. They go on a raid up north there. I wanted to show you this little line. So what they would typically do is have a name of the place they took with a depiction of these people being captured. Their elbows are tied together in kind of shackles there in an uncomfortable position. Here you have Yahudah right there. So Judah, this is where he says that they did conquer Judah or Judah. In any case, Rehoboam is able to give him lots of gold and things like that Solomon had gathered, some of it from the temple, and they don't destroy Jerusalem as they do some other places. Then we get some interesting intrigues going on. Let's go through them a little bit here. Rehoboam dies, and Abijam, his son, becomes his king. But Abijam is wicked. His heart is not perfect before the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. In other words, he worships idols, and he sponsors idol worship. But because of the covenant with David, God will allow these descendants of David to stay on the throne. And so Rehoboam and Jeroboam fought all the days of their life, and then Abijam and Rehoboam are always fighting. So there's always this war between them. Eventually Abijam dies, and Asa, his son, reigns over Judah. And Asa is a righteous king who does right in the eyes of the Lord, and he removes his mother from being the queen mother because she sponsors idol worship, and he tries to get rid of idol worship as well. Now in the record it goes a little bit out of order because it talks about some dealings between Baasha and Asa, and it does that before it talks about how Baasha became king. So let's do that quickly. Nadab, Jeroboam's son, is king over Israel, but only for a very short time because Baasha conspires against him and kills him and all of Jeroboam's descendants, fulfilling prophecy and wiping out the line of Jeroboam. So then Baasha will become king, and Baasha starts to fight against Asa, and Asa allies himself with Ben-Hadad of Syria, and they attack, kind of sandwiching Baasha, and this gives some relief to the kings of Judah who are being kind of taken over by the kings of Israel. So that's where we get in our reading.